the meeting as well. So as we usually do at the beginning of each of these webinars, I wanted to start off by giving you guys a chance to go over any questions you might have with regards to the exercise and setting up the template and using Fusion Pro and all that good stuff. So I will kind of leave it up to you guys at this point.
So we're just getting it installed and haven't quite got into the meat of it quite yet, but we're hoping to do that the next few days.
Okay. All right, so then today is essentially going over an HTML product. I am by no means an HTML expert, nor am I an expert on setting up this product. I did successfully create an HTML product, and I designed and set up a piece to go through the demonstration. What I will provide you guys is our user guide for this that goes over kind of the nuts and bolts of how what you do when you're setting up the product. From my perspective, not being an expert with HTML, it seemed very straightforward, and most of the points of question I was able to address directly in the product guide, or even just a simple question with one of our people here that supports it. So I'll go over those points, the kind of the couple of pain points that I came across, just to make sure you guys are aware of that pain points, whatever, just workflow things that I had to kind of learn going forward with this. So first thing I'm going to do is show you guys the completed version of the item. I didn't put a product image in here, so it doesn't come up with anything, but I will go into this product. So the item that I have here in question kind of follows the same theme, actually a very similar theme to what you guys saw in your template that you're going to be working on. I kind of used a similar set of functionality with logic with regards to the same destination. So in the template that you'll be working on or building that has to do with the destination flyer, you get to choose between Bali, Seychelles, and the Maldives as my basically 3 conditions or 3 destinations you can choose from. That's going to trigger the graphic content. In the same sense, I'm doing that here with this particular template as well. So what I have here is this is kind of set up to be some sort of newsletter that I'm going to export out as HTML. You have the choice when you're setting this to get it out as HTML or get it out as an EML. And so I don't recall if I actually set it up for both, but at any rate, you get access to the file and it copies to your kind of pasteboard, and then you can do with it what you need to at that point. So just to show you the functionality here with this, I have my my different destinations here, which is going to change the graphic and change the content that's in here. So I'll come in and I'll pick Seychelles, and what we see here is it triggers my new graphic. It puts in text here that's specific to that. I've got a headline that comes up here that's one that I've created and set up for this. And then I also have a color theme that I set up in here. This is just to kind of show you how you can have some flexibility to define. For example, here if I want the buttons in here to be green, I can switch that, and I have a light blue one as well, so it kind of switches with that. And then of course there's the default blue that's on here. When I switch to one of these different destinations, of course, like I said, the graphic changes, the text content changes, the button here changes with that text graphic, and also the link that's associated to this changes as well. So you can't see it, but I'll point it out when we set it up. But there's it's pointing to I just use like a travelandleisure.com, and I'm pointing to some page that talks about the Maldives, and same thing with Bali and Seychelles and all that stuff. So and then the rest of this is just typical stuff, contact us, all that, which I for the most part I used our information to Markham Central and all that, and then I created kind of a couple of extra things here just to spice it up. So with regards to this, let's say, so I'm happy with this particular one. I go here to digital delivery, and I have the EML and HTML. So I do have both on that. And in order to get access to the file, you can just click here to generate, or you can have it sent to email you the information. So I'll set it up to do both. Here I'll do I'll generate the this one here, and then I'll download that. And then what I'll do is I'll do the email, the EML one, and I'll have that emailed to me, and we'll go from there with that.
Anybody familiar with the EML? I'm not either. Can you explain the difference between HTML and EML? Do you know that?
HTML is obvious. It's a it's the language that it's set up, and EML is a specific output type for Outlook emails. So that can be opened up in Outlook, and you can use that that output to actually bring into Outlook and send an email from there.
Got it.
So here, I can just copy this to my pasteboard. Now it brings it into my URL is copied with that information, and then I can go here and just paste it in, and whatever I want to do with that. And so here's the full thing on the web page that I can see here, and then you can paste the content and do whatever you need to do with that. With the email one here, I'll select this one, and I'll do the email it to myself here. So I'll just email. And I'll say it's EML download, and all right, and then I'll send the email for that. So I'll come over in a second here. Probably will notify me in just a moment. It's all done. I'll close it up here. So it'll come across here in just a second. Now, in the meantime, what I will do is I'm going to minimize this here and show you my code for this. Not that I'm going to go into the code. I actually have it open already. I won't be going into any of this stuff in here. But one of the things to point out is that the variables that are going to be in this. Here's my email with this. I can pull it up. And here's a link with this, and then it says HTML because that's the name I named the product that. So it just has the link name as the name of the product. But when I click on that, it I guess it opened up in my browser too. Let's do this. I'll copy the hyperlink, and then I can do whatever I want with that, paste it somewhere or whatever. What was it warning me about? Oh, okay, so here's the file right here for that I can go ahead and, it went to my downloads. So it's just the EML version of that. And then it popped open over here in my Outlook. So here's the version of it in an email format, which then I can go ahead and send out from here.
Okay, great.
All right, so back to here. The only thing I want to point out with the code, because obviously this is your guys' kind of forte, designing and doing how you want to set it up. But when you have your variables in the content in here, variables have to be designated in a very specific way. So here you can see that they have these piano brackets on both sides. So the piano brackets, or the whatever you want to call them, I'll draw them here and make them more visible. These kind of brackets right here. So mustache brackets, piano brackets, they're called a bunch of different things, but that's the type of designation that you're indicating that this is a variable. So you just want to make sure that you're using that when you set that up in there. Now what we do is when it comes into Marcom Central, these are recognized as variables, and therefore you'll have those fields to control when they get into the template setup. So we'll bring this in, and you'll see I have I think probably 6 or 8 variables that are in here. You can see one here. Here's the heading, which is that the text that appears up at the top. That I still have it open. So I have the variable here, which is my header. I have a graphic variable here for the information there. I'm using the destination selection as a variable element that triggers several things. So that destination is triggering the graphic, it's triggering the headline, it's triggering the block of text, it's triggering the link that goes in here. So there's 4 things that selection is doing in the process. When I go over here and I make this choice, I have that triggering these different actions that are going on in here. With the this, or pull it back up here so we can just talk about it further. Well, let's just go ahead and bring it in. I'll talk about it when I get in here. One other thing that's of importance to know is that when you're setting up a graphic variable, when they come into Marcom Central, all the variables, we have to make an assumption. There is no way to designate that this is a graphic variable or a text variable. We just assume that this is a text variable whenever this stuff is brought in. So when you bring that in, just be aware of that you're going to have to either do one of 2 things. You're going to have to use some sort of UI rule to indicate how the graphic is displayed, or you're going to have to create and insert that graphic variable, which is what I'm going to do when we set this up. So, for example, I used a placeholder in here for destination info. It's not there. It's somewhere. This one right here. I used a placeholder. This one is called destination image. I did that because I'm going to create a graphic variable. Like sometimes, and I noticed one of our the person that does our HTML here, they'll say like they'll indicate in some way that it's a placeholder. Like I'm going to replace this variable with a graphic variable once I get into Marcom Central, and I'll kind of I'll have to show you that when we do the setup up here in just a moment. So I'm going to minimize this here, and then we will get logged into Marcom Central, which do here. So go. All right, now I believe I already activated the HTML product, so hopefully it'll be in here. I'm trying to see. Actually, I may be using a different portal. Hold on. I think Journey Travel is the one I've been using. That's the one that's got it active. So I'll switch to that. That'll correct that. Okay, so Journey Travel is the one I've been setting up as we've been going through the process. So when I go to products here, I'll go ahead and add our new product, which will be the HTML product. So I did not activate it. All right, so give me a second here. I'm going to have to go activate it real quick. Okay, Journey Travel. Hold on, it's pointing to the wrong one here. Okay, now I got it. So I have to activate that product type, which I did not do. and I think I'll have to activate it for you all as well. But that'll be, I mean, you can use my sample HTML if you want to, but ideally it's probably better suited for you guys to use your own because you're going to be familiar with what the variables are and all that stuff. So let me do this and just refresh the page. It should just pop up now. I guess it wasn't done saving on that side. Hold on. There it is. Okay. So this is my newsletter. Let's say it's monthly newsletter here, and then I'll put in whatever. No. So again, I selected it as HTML. I'll save that here, and then I'll put in a product image and do all that stuff as we normally do with a new product. All right. So here I did create a product image for this. So we'll have that, and we'll say this is HTML. All right, and then instructions will just say, you know, make your selections and all right. So digital delivery, I'll set that up here too before we go. So it's our, you know, you can only do this as digital delivery. Obviously, email, you know, EML and HTML. I'll select as the delivery options as download and email, and then template setup. I don't think I'm going to use. There's no, you know, if you wanted to go through an approval process, you can specify that. We covered the approval stuff when we went through our users, so it functions the exact same way. You know, before they're able to go ahead and do their order, an email just triggered out. The approver reviews the file, reviews the, you know, the request first before it becomes downloadable. I'll kind of spare us that part of it for right now, and then we're going to go into the template setup here, and I'll just save it to make sure all the settings that I just did are locked in, and then I'll go into my template configuration. All right, so I'm going to go into configure here. All right, so as I indicated, I have all the variables that are in here, and like I said, I can't remember exactly, but I think I probably have about 8 of them. So here's 1, 2, 3, you know, 4, 5. You know, that's the same one that I think I already used. So there's a handful of these. So when I bring this in now, so let's go ahead and I'll browse to and select a file, my desktop in here, and then my HTML file. And you upload it similar to the way you do a template file. So you get, you know, once you get to this point here, you come in and it just validates what we got, and it comes in. So here's all of my variables that I have in here. Now, I'm not clear on the order sequence that they're in here. It's probably just the order, you know, as you're going down the line order that they are in the HTML, because I think the top one that I have is this one for destination image. So that's the top one that's in here. This is one that I'm actually going to not use. I'm going to create a graphic variable for that. Like down here, I can create an image field, and we're going to put that in here. So this one, technically, I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of. I'm going to just make it inactive. I'm not going to use it at all. The accent color one is going to be what allows me to change that bar color, this thing right here, and then this thing down here, and I think this one down here also. It does all three of those. So I'm going to be able to change the color for that, and we'll mess with that. Obviously, the heading on here. So I'm actually going to kind of jockey these around a little bit. So my destination, I'm going to move it up to the top here. So this is why we have our sort order set up here. So I'll put that at 10. Again, we're making this one inactive, so that's not going to move much. Accent color value. Now this is actually going to contain, once we set this up, it's going to contain the hex value for the color that I want to display in that. So I'm going to create a text field that we're going to use with the user-friendly names like blue, green, and light blue. And then what I'm going to do is use a UI rule to switch between the hex values for each one of those ones. If your users are familiar with the hex values, you can set that up and have them go through that and even show graphics of what the colors look like. If they're not used to using those, then of course you would want to do what I'm going to show you, and that's what we'll have in here. Another thing to point out, and this is something that I kind of learned just by playing around with this. One of our designers here was showing me that I have 3 blocks of text for each of the destinations that are in there. Each one of those blocks of text is formatted with its own div style inside of the content in here. So I have my text for Bali, I have my text for the Seychelles, and I have my text here for the Maldives. Now they all appear initially when I bring it in. So if I were to look at this, the data from this, and I drop it into my browser, it's going to have all 3 of these paragraphs. But one of the things that I'm going to show you that you can do is there's a tag that you can use specifically to turn these different styles off. So here I named this div style destination MAL for Maldives, SEY for Seychelles, and Bali for Bali. So what we're going to do is I'm going to turn those on and off in their respective instances, and that's one of the things that we'll do here with that. So there's a couple of these that we're not going to show. I'm not going to show these right here. I'm not going to show any of these because I'm going to actually trigger what happens with those. The info link, I'm going to use that. That's the URL that's going to be connected to the button that's on there. And then the destination, of course, I'm moving that up to the top, and I want that to be visible. So what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and apply, and it'll update and reorder these things, and it'll hide my, I have it set up to hide the inactive field, so that one that I'm not using is now removed from there. And I'm going to go ahead and add an image field right here. So this one we'll call it our destination graphic. So I'll hit OK. So it just puts it in here down at the bottom. Where it sits is not going to matter because it's going to be hidden ultimately, so I'll go ahead and set that as hidden as well. This is going to be an image. It doesn't matter with the drop-down here, gallery with drop-down or anything, because I'm going to automate the selection of that graphic. So we're going to have a drop-down that they pick between this destination and that destination, and then we'll set that up. So I am going to make that hidden. I'll hit apply here. Now what I'm going to do now before I start messing around with the form and then ultimately coming down here to set up my UI rules, and we also have to bring in our graphics for these different ones in here. For those, I'm going to go ahead and, well, we'll do that here in just a moment. So the first thing I'm going to do is add this graphic variable into my code, and I'm going to replace the existing one. So notice that there's an HTML tab over here. The HTML is, you can adjust the HTML directly in this menu right in here. One of my first thoughts was like, well, why do you have to upload a file when you can just go in here and you can just paste in your HTML? Well, you can do that, but the thing is it won't recognize, if I just paste in new HTML in here, it's not going to recognize the variables that are in this when you paste it in. When you import a file, it looks for those escape characters that identify that this is a variable field. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to create each of the variables, and then you'd have to insert it into your code or just make sure that they match what's in your code. So it's important that the first time you go in and you do the import, but then from here, I can really just make and tweak and manipulate. As long as I'm not changing any of the field names, or if I'm just making a modification to my code, you can just paste that in to here because the fields already exist. We just looked at them on the Form Display tab. So now what I'm going to do is come in here and find that the one for my graphic, which is right here, the destination image. So this is the one that I removed. That's the text variable that was in my code as kind of the placeholder. So what I'm going to do is go up here up the top and insert a field. You can, I guess I didn't know you could add the image or text field here. I did it on the Form Display tab, but you can do it here at this point if you wanted to as well. So what I'm going to do is open up my Insert Field dropdown, and then I'm going to come in here and grab my image, my graphic one that I did in there, hit Apply. And again, if I scroll down a little bit here where that one was, there's my image destination graphic. When you add a text or graphic variable, it always puts the word image or text in front of it. We just do that. Marcom Central does that, and that's our way of identifying that it was added after the fact. You know, after the code was already brought in. All right, so now I can come over to here, and we'll manage that independently. So first thing I'm going to do is also let's manage the graphics, and then we'll start to play with these different fields in here. So I have the 3 images in here that I have for Bali, Maldives, and Seychelles. I have to get them into my shared library in order to have those triggered by the selection. Now you could write your code in such a way that you have, if you guys wanted to host these images somewhere, and you just basically between those different choices, you put the path to, you know, the SRC path for where the image resides. You could do it that way as well. The process is going to be fairly similar to what we're doing. It's just that you would be using a, you wouldn't have to create this as a graphic field. You would just basically be inputting the search path in the, like in a drop-down. So I'd have, you know, the http:// you know, Bali JPEG, Seychelles JPEG, whatever, and that would be put into the code with that variable that we replaced, and it would be based on the selection that they make. So you're going to see me go through that process. However, instead of using the file path, I'm just going to be selecting the field and the graphic that goes along with that when we go do our UI rules here in just a moment. Now, the other thing I just want to point out is these graphics down here, these ones, because they're not going to be variable at all, I have them just hosted on an FTP so that these automatically come in. So I have the SRC, you know, the image search path for where these are located in the HTML. So again, coming back to here, if I pull those guys up, it's going to be down here near the bottom. I have here for, I think this is one of my links down here. So wherever it is, I might not have got to it yet. Well, it's in here somewhere. Oh, here it is right here. Yeah, so here's, I have the graphic, so the image search path is just specified right in here. These are just sitting on my FTP, which if I go ahead and open this up and copy this, and I can just show you that, you know, where these are sitting in my browser. So I just have these graphics sitting in here. I don't want to open that up in Google.
So what you're basically, so yeah, just so what you're basically doing is we need to get the HTML built ourselves, and then all you're doing is making some field variable, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So here I've got these guys all set up right here so we can see the graphics. I was also, for testing purposes, I put those graphics in here too because I was also just trying it out and making sure it worked, and it's pointing to those before I got it set up. So that back there. All right, so now I've got all my variables in here. Let's go ahead and bring those graphics in. I'm going to, again, I'm not using the, I'm going to put the graphics in a library. So I'm going to go into my shared libraries in here, and I'm going to create a new library just because I don't have one for this just yet. So I'll do, I'll call this HTML, and I'll do newsletter images. I'll hit OK. So here I'll go ahead and browse to and select my 3 graphics. So I got these 3 right here. So So I'll go ahead and upload those. I'm going to need a text list with these different destinations. So I'm going to create a text list. So I'll call this my destination list. And I'll create that. So my graphics are uploaded in here on the Images tab. When I go over here to my text list, I created that list with my destination images. You don't have to do this, but it's just a component that you can do when you bring in images. Since my image names are going to be the same as my destinations, I'm just going to go in here and set it up that way. So here I have, Bali, Maldives, and Seychelles, and I'm going to switch the order on these because I have these in a particular order in my code that I'll keep referencing here. Hit apply to save that, and then hit OK. All right, so I got my list there. There's another set, and I mentioned that back over here, these fields, there's going to be a piece of code that I'm going to put in there that's going to be either I don't want to use this one or I want to use this block of text. So since I'm going to do it 3 times, I'm also going to create that as a text list. So I'm going to create a new text list in here for that, and this one is going to be called my text block list. And then here, these values are going to be none, which means I don't want to use that text block. And then the other one I'm going to use is block, which means I do want to use that block. So none and block. And then I'll go ahead and here and hit OK. All right, so I have my destination list and my text block list, and then my images, which I'm going to use in just a moment here. So I'll go back to my template. I'm going to go to the Images tab here, and I'm going to add the library images because I now want to associate them to this particular template. So I got to come in here and find my HTML. Not on the list, which let me do this real quick. Sometimes when you update something in the library like that, it doesn't automatically come in here. So let me go here and pull it up. Where's HTML? Okay, it's not showing up. Let's see here. Why isn't it showing up? Go back over here. It's right there. I can see it. What is going on here? Maybe it's because it looks like it's still rendering these images for some reason. So maybe that's why it's not finding them. See. Let me try again real quick here.
Is it making thumbnails and low-res files from those?
It is, but yeah, this is typically, it happens within seconds here.
Oh.
Let me delete those. I built this thing like 3 times going through it, and this is the first time it's hung up on this where it's not able to generate the graphics. So maybe what I'll do is I'll come back to the graphics here, and we'll deal with it in just a second because it's still not showing up. So maybe I'll just give it some time. what I will do is I can get in here and I can start to set these other elements up in here. So the destination is going to be a library dropdown. That's why I just created those 3 destinations in a list there. My accent colors, that's also going to be a dropdown that I'll create that. So you'll get a sense of how you can create a dropdown here on the fly and how you can use what we did in the library. The heading, I'll make a dropdown as well, just because this could be a free field if you wanted to, and we can I can leave that open too if you want to. Let's actually do that, so I don't have to have to make a selection here with that. So maybe I'll unhide that one and we'll put in here I'll change this and call it, say it's headline or something like that, and then the person ordering this can type in what they want for their headline. These ones right here are going to be library dropdown because that's where I'm going to use that one that says none or block depending upon the destination. The info link is also going to be a dropdown which I'll create. This one will eventually get set up here once I get it to function properly. Now, I'm going to create a text field that's going to have actually the color-friendly value names. So this one, like I mentioned, is going to use the hex values. So what I need to come up with is a text field that they can choose their different things. So I'll say here this will be the, let's say I'll call it color theme for that, and I'll make it sit at number 30 because I'm going to bring in this one up here. So color theme, I'm going to move this guy down to 35, move this 20 just to reorder these. Okay, so what I have is they're going to pick the destination. They're going to have a headline that they can type in. I did it as a single line. We can set a limit to that too, how many characters they can type in, so that might be one of the benefits of allowing them to type it in. And then I'll have my color theme here, which is going to be a drop-down, which we'll set up here. So let me apply that. So to set my library list that we did, we've already put that in the shared library here. If I go to my destination, now the text list, it shouldn't be affected by the graphic not showing up because if the image section is waiting for the graphics to show up. This one right here, I'll go to my HTML images, and then I have my destination list and my text block list. So this is my destination list clearly, so I'll click that. I'll leave a blank value in that, so when they first come in, or actually maybe I'll set it without one. That way when it come in, it'll already have Bali selected, but you could have a blank value there. And if you wanted to put in a note, you can specify that. When we're dealing with a drop-down, when it says size in here, whenever you look at a drop-down like these ones right in here, you can see that we only show one value at a time. If I open it up, you can see all the values that are in the list, but once something is selected, you only see one, and that's what size is referring to. For text field, size is basically the size of the field that you can type your entry in, and we'll see that when we go to that headline field, and I'll make an adjustment to that so we have like a certain number of characters we can type in. That's where this maximum character length thing comes in, but I'm not sure why we show that for a drop-down, but I'll go ahead here and hit OK. So it's going to have my list of those. Now the heading one, again, we just said that we're going to set that one up. I'll adjust this, and I don't really know how many characters, whatever the limit is, but let's say we did some testing, and let's say it's I'll say I can type in 35 characters, if there is, and we'll say, enter your headline for the selected destination. All right, then I'll hit OK. And then here for my text color theme. So this one I used a library. This one right here, I set it as a drop-down. What I'm going to do is create the values. So I have my standard color that I'll call travel blue. Add that to the text list here. So it looks very similar to what we did in the library. The advantage of using a library is I can reuse that list more than one time. When you set it up here for the individual field, it's only good for this one field. So that's why I created that one that had none and block in there, because I'm going to use that list 3 times instead of having to create the list 3 times. So this one here, and I could have done this in a library too. I mean, if you're if you're using a list for something more than one time, it obviously makes sense to create it in the library there. And then here I'll do, say, sky blue. Add that to my list. And then here I'll say, you know, I don't want a blank value in the drop-down, or, yeah, I'll say no blank value. And then I'll hit OK. All right, and then for my accent colors, this is where I'm going to need to put in the hex values. So I've already pulled up the hex values, and I jotted them down. So I've got them over here off screen that I'm just going to bring those in so I don't have to search for them. So here, I'll copy it there, paste that in. So put that in there. That's the blue color. Then I have my green value. And this one here, which is my light blue or sky blue value there. And once again, I'm not going to show a value in here. So what's going to happen here with this is these values are going to be triggered by my user-friendly ones that say blue, green, sky blue. And then those ones will be triggered by using a UI rule over here. These ones all here are going to use my library list. So I'm just going to go pick that really quick, go into HTML. This is going to be my text block list. I'm going to say there's no blank value because it's going to either be none or it's going to be block. And then I'm going to do that for each one of these ones. All right, so each one of those is going to just be a drop-down that says that, and we'll look at that here in a second before, well, I'll make all these unhidden. Let's do that here for a second before we do this. We'll go look at them in the form before we set this thing up, and then I'll hide them again just to make sure you guys kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. The info link one, same thing here with this. I'm going to create a list. I have these are just destination links for each one of those that I was using, you know, just travelandleisure.com. So here, I'm going to paste this in. So this is actually going to be what's the link that's on the button there. Well, let's get the bullet point too. I'll get rid of that. Paste that in here. That to the list. Ditch the bullet. And I'll say no to that, and I'll hit OK. All right. So I'll go look and let me go see if the images are done. I would assume they're done by now. We gave up plenty of time. There they are. Yay. OK. So the graphics are there now. So I'll select the 3 graphics, which all this does when you're setting up in here, and this is the exact same premise that you'll go over with the destination flyer that you're using. It's just a different graphic, obviously. When you're linking it to the template, all we're doing is making the association from the library to the template. Now, with the template, I believe when we set that up, we had a rule. So the rule was built into the template that if they pick this value, then we're going to show this image. If they pick that value, then we're going to show that image. So when you're dealing with rules, all you have to do is link the images to the template. When we're doing this for the HTML side of it, this is going to be a choice that they make, and there's no rule logic built into the HTML. The rule logic has to be done here, and that's where the UI rule is going to come into play. So what we have to do is, I've selected my images here. I'm going to hit OK, or remember, apply and OK do the same thing. Apply basically saves these images to the template, so if I wanted to go to another library, I could go pick more images. OK is just going to save the images and close the library browsing. So now we can see there's the 3 images linked to my template. What we need to do now is I'm going to come back over to this form display and then link the images to this field, because you could have more than one graphic field. So we don't make an assumption that those graphics all go to this one field. If I had 3 different graphic fields that you could choose from, I'd have to say these images go with that field, those images go with this field, and we'd have to make those designations specifically. So here I'll click on that, and it's showing me the 3 graphics that are over there that are in my images tab, and then I'll add them to the drop-down, so now they're here. Now, we have these cropping components that you can do. Clearly with HTML, your images are probably going to be set up the way you want them to be set up. If you wanted to do cropping with that, I'm sure you can play with it. But the cropping tool is really more specifically intended for templates, not for HTML products. But it's there if you needed it for whatever reason. So here I'll go ahead and hit OK. And now what I can do, before we do any of the UI rules to set this up, I'm going to go look at the preview, and you can see how everything is set up. So again, I have Bali with my 3 drop-down options right there. I have my headline, which is going to be, I'm able to type in whatever I want. Here's my user-friendly name, which what's going to happen is when I pick green, I'm going to set it up so it automatically picks this. So that's why we can have this be hidden here. And then when they pick this value, it's going to pick my graphics down in here, which again I haven't set up. And when they pick this value, it's going to pick the proper one down here. And when I pick this value, it's going to pick the none or block that goes with each one of these ones. So that's why I'm having these fields hidden and set up. So here you can see my none and block. Here we can see the 3 URLs. Here I can see the 3 actual graphics and the 3 text values and the 3 user-friendly values. So we'll go ahead and we'll hide these ones in there. Well, I'll hide it after the fact, but we'll get to see what it does once I set up my UI rules. So I'll close this for now, and we'll come back and we'll hide these things at the end here. So I'm going to jump over to UI rules. So the one that is probably, in this case, is the only one that I'm going to be using is going to be this one called Cascading Dropdown on Selection Change. So what that means is I've got one dropdown that's going to tell these other dropdowns what to do. So here I'm going to add a rule instance, and I'm going to have to add a bunch of these. So you'll see the logic here as it goes, but unfortunately this is the only way you can really create kind of the interactivity like this. So when the destination value is equal to Bali, I'm not going to mess around with the text color theme. I want my destination image, let's do that one here first, just because it's right off the top of my head, is going to match to Bali. So it's very similar to the type of switch functionality you can do in Fusion Pro, and that's what I had you guys doing when you're setting up your template there. If you pick this destination, then show this graphic. It was a switch graphic rule that you're doing. We're doing the same sort of functionality here. It's just, again, we don't support that sort of rule building capabilities in the actual HTML, so you have to do it through the UI rules here in Marcom. So I've set up that one for Bali, hit OK, and that's just one instance. And I have to do that for each one. So here, switch it to Seychelles, switch it to image graphic, and then I come down here to Seychelles, hit OK, and then add another one for the next one. And then again, for every single instance, there has to be, I have to tell it what I want to do in that instance. So destination is driving the 3 graphics. So I'm going to keep adding these to do the other things. So Bali is also going to indicate my info link. So the info link here is the Bali one. We'll tick that. So now you can see where the button is now going to have that associated to it, and it's going to bring it in. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. So it's Seychelles. Come down here to info link. There's Seychelles. Hit OK. And I just keep going until I get all these ones set up. So the Maldives is going to be the info link for Maldives, and then hit OK. So my links, my info link is all done in there. I'm going to go to the next one now. Again, Bali is still managing a couple of these things. I'm going to manage these 3 right here. So for destination Bali, what I'm going to do is, this is where I have to come in here for my text theme. I have to come in and say, OK, then destination Bali right here is set to block. None means we don't show it. Block means show that block is what it means. So I'll hit OK. And then what I have to do is all the other instances I have to indicate what happens. So this one, unfortunately, is kind of weird, because when I say Bali here, I also have to say, what do I do with the Seychelles? I'm going to say, I don't want to see that one. Then I go ahead and hit OK. And then when I go to the next one, again, I'll keep it set to Bali, go down to Maldives, and I don't want to see that one. So now I have to do the same thing. So I have to create 3 instances for each of these ones in order to change the text block in there. Now, the flip side of that is I could create a text block in a drop-down or something like that, but we do provide, or there is a limit to how much text you can put in one of those text lists in here. So there are other tools that you can use, like we have a thing called intelligent forms, and you can have that set up in a spreadsheet that's triggering a block of text. But this is one way that I opted to do it this way, where it's in the code. It just requires a bunch of setup steps like this. So you can see here, if we look at this, and apologize if it's really small to see, but you can see when Bali is the value, Bali is the block. When Bali is the value, the Seychelles one is none, and Bali is value, Maldives is none. And now I have to create those same 3 instances, but with a different value. So Seychelles here, go to this one's none, hit OK. And then I just keep going and making sure I get all this set up. So Seychelles is block, and then I hit OK. And I add another, Seychelles, Maldives is none, then hit OK. And then we do our last one, Maldives, and I have to do the same thing over again. None. Oops. Maldives. None. Maldives. Block. All right. And then the last one I'll set up is going to be the color one. And this one, we just have to create 3 for each color. So this destination is triggering a bunch of different things. So now we'll do the last 3 that I have here, which is going to be, oops, not that one. It's going to be my text color theme as the travel blue, travel green, sky blue. So we'll do travel blue. I'll switch this to my color accent value, and that's this one. So now I hit OK. And then add another rule instance. I'll do, oops, wrong one. Switch this here. Text color theme, travel green, accent color, that's the green, hit OK. And then my last one, text color theme, sky blue, accent color, there's blue, hit OK. All right, now when we go to our preview, this drop down, watch what happens to all these fields in here. I go into click Seychelles, it triggers it here. So the graphic is the only one selected there. Here's the selection for the URL. You can see this one set to none, block none, and that's what we want. Then here with travel blue, it's obviously picking this one there. If I switch it to green, it switches that one. If I switch it to sky blue, it switches to that one, and we have our text set up in here. And again, our headline will set up in here. So now you can see why I would hide all these things. All these values down here, not that one, but these bottom ones can all be hidden because these selections up here are really triggering what happens down below. So what I'll do now is we'll come back over to here, and just down the list here I can go accent color, check, 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 check is hidden, so they are not visible, hit apply, and then when I go to my preview, again, those all go away, but it's still going to do the same thing. Seychelles, here's my headline. This is a place to be. And then it's in green. I can see I also switch the bar down there. This is a place to be. Switch it to Maldives, and big block of text, the picture of the beautiful place on the water. And here's the beautiful resort with all that stuff, travel green, sky blue. There we go. And then, of course, we'll publish this and make it live. And let's see. Now, this is going to be one of those things that, like, once you, I mean, I can, as I said before, I can provide you guys my HTML if you want to go over this exact exercise. All I have in the setup of this are my notes in order for me to set this thing up. I'm happy to provide those notes for you if you want to do that. If you want to try to build this particular product, if that's easier for you guys. If, you know, I think probably ideally it's going to be better for you guys to use your own, you know, planned HTML that you're going to create. Whatever you're going to do is build that and then get in here and set it up and, you know, work with it and try to set it up on your own. The key thing that you're going to have to remember is the graphics are going to have to come through one of 2 ways. You're going to do that switch thing where instead of, you know, instead of setting up my UI rules back over here, I would set this, I would have left my image field as a text field, and then what I would be putting in is that search path for these graphics. So like where this graphic resides right in here, I can just come in here and I can copy the link address, and what I would have is the link address for each one of those. So it would point to that graphic. If you want to host them, we could do that. So again, the flip side of that is I would have that text returning the image search path versus having the actual graphic, which is in our library and is selected by the end user by doing the choice. You can also just have a graphic that they choose. You know, we don't have to make it as complicated as you pick this value and it triggers that graphic, and you pick this value and it triggers that graphic. You could just say, here's your destinations, pick the graphic that you want, and then you can, they can do that. It would be done the same exact way that we set it up. You just wouldn't have to create a UI rule for that. I just didn't want to have a repeating thing where they picked the destination and then they had to pick the image that matched that destination. That's the whole point of doing the UI rule, is to filter that out.
Okay. Yeah, I think we'd like to get your template anyways. I'm sure we'll have our own HTML, but it'll be a nice reference.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll zip all that stuff up, the HTML with the graphic content. I'll include my notes and then also the user guide that goes with the HTML one, and then we'll go from there. So the last thing, of course, is I'll publish this, which is the same thing you do with templates. It just makes it live, and then we'll go. I'll still have to add this to the portal. Or to the catalog. I haven't added it in at this point. So let me close it up here. I'll do it in a new tab just to go to the catalog editor here, in case I need to go back to the product. So here, I'll add that into my marketing items in here. Add product. Here's my monthly newsletter. So I'll save that in there, which is visible. I'll make it active, and then publish it as well. So remember, you got to make it active and you got to publish it. It seems kind of redundant, but if you're not seeing things appear in the catalog, that's one of the things. The first thing we have you check out is did you set that up? And then so for right now, I'll go to log in. So actually, let me log out of here for the time being so it doesn't create a problem. And then I'll log in as one of my guys. So we created these guys the other day when we were setting these things up. I'll just pick this gentleman right here. So marketing items, there's my newsletter, and I can go customize it. So here it is. Let me zoom out a little bit to give more space, perhaps. All right, so I'll pick Maldives, again, switches my graphics, put in my headline. There we go. Again, it's got the text block for the Maldives, and then let's say I want to do the sky blue, it switches it there, and there's all my graphic content there. And then I come down to digital delivery, and again, same functionality we saw before. Generate the file, download selected, and we got it where we want. So, and just out of curiosity, how are you guys intending to use the HTML output? What is your guys' use case?
Well, I think our original understanding or misunderstanding was that you could generate the HTML in SmartCom, not necessarily do these customized portals where we would have to have created the HTML ourselves first. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's what we were just figuring we could build the entire email from start to finish in here, but it sounds like we need to have somebody build out the HTML, and then we're just creating some variables to customize the output. As far as like these, I think we would just have them spit out the HTML and then we just download it. They would download it, and then they would use whatever email program. It'd probably be some partners of ours that would use this, and then they would use whatever email service they have, paste that final email HTML in whatever email service they have, and send it out.
Yeah, I think B2B uses Constant Contact.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should be able to just paste the HTML into Constant Contact to build the email if that's the case. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, 'cause we use ExactTarget, and then when you're creating an email, the choice of using one of their kind of templates to build it, or just pasting in the HTML, and then and then it uses. I'm pretty sure it uses the same variable tags. That would be the only kind of caveat that you guys might have with that is, making sure how how constant contact or whatever the source is, whatever that source uses for the escape character. And what that is essentially is that, at the beginning, when I was showing you this, or I got rid of it. Each of these companies kind of uses their own escape tag. So this basically is just saying, hey, the next thing that's coming after this is the variable. And then usually that's going to be associated to some list. And like the email address might be in there, and the name of the person might be in there, and whatever product or service that you're offering is going to be in a list. And then when you do the blast, it's just basically plopping in the variables. What we're doing here is obviously we're setting up the variables, and you can do all that stuff. You can set all that stuff up and have it in there. You don't have to have values for those things. You can have them just set up in the in the form. Let me copy this while I'm here. You can just have those fields in the form in there, and then they're able to see, as an example, they can see that stuff. But when they get the HTML, we can have the it'll have the tags in the HTML for that. I mean, if you guys are you going to be allowing them to actually customize these pieces, or are you just giving them the HTML for an email that they're going to download? Like,
I think the idea was for them to be able to customize, certain pieces of it. We like the idea of, having the banner, having them choose which banner, or the title. It looks like we would be a little bit more, we'd have to go through the process and figure out which content we want them to customize. But I think that's why this is nice. I mean, we'd have to build the HTML first, of course, and go through that process. But once we get that done and dialed in and go through these steps, just having them customized, putting their own, like right now you have time to travel in that footer. I would assume that they'd want to put their own email address, all their contact information, not unlike a business card and stuff like that.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So I think this is really helpful. It's just getting us down the path of who we need to build the HTML first, and then what elements we want to customize.
Yeah. I mean, it works a lot like the way Fusion Pro works. So once you kind of go through that, some of that stuff will hit home. At least I feel it's very similar to that. The big difference is you're dealing with an actual graphic file format in the PDF, and then the tool to set all these things up and to put the variables in, and you're kind of building all that stuff in in a GUI that you can actually see and see that set that up. Whereas with the HTML, you're just working through the code, and yeah, you can see a proof of that, but it's all code driven. That to me is the big difference between the two. But they have very similar principles as far as using graphics and doing logic and things like that. It's just the HTML doesn't let you do the kind of the JavaScript logic that we can do with templates.
So when you have this original template built, did you build it yourself through some sort of tool, or did you have your team kind of build you this template?
This is actually a piece that we have in one of our demo stores, and I took the code from that, and then I completely changed everything on it, because I'm not really a wizard at all with HTML. I just went in and I changed everything. It was, you guys may have seen, Jensen Bank or Jensen Insurance or whatever we use as our demo portal, and this was some sort of like, investor quarterly newsletter. And what I did is I just reskinned it for time to travel, changed all the content in there, and set it up, the way I wanted it to be set up. That's why also in here I just kind of noticed this when I pasted in the URL in there. It puts in here, and this is like our monthly or quarterly letter or something like that is what that means. And I was like, oh, now I know where that is, because it's in the code. It's like right up at the top, like that's what shows on the browser when you pull it in. That's something that I can add to this or change to it or whatever. I saw it somewhere in here as I was going through it, or right up here at the top. Like, so that's where that's coming in. But yeah, so more than likely what our team does is they they'll set it up in something like Dreamweaver, and they'll get it all dialed in and laid out, and they'll work with the code and get it set up, and then they'll probably go kind of back over it, and they'll insert the variables in there where they want the variables to go to change things. Like, behind the scenes right in here, the text for destination comes in and it picks that graphic, but the actual link to the button is coming from that InfoLink variable that we have in the text. And then here, of course, the block of text is just saying, it's either saying show hide this, and then we have our free field here for that, and then the destination is picking that graphic. So it's all just where the actual, the value that's coming from is, where is it coming from? Are you doing the drop down and the UI rule like we did, or is it just, code that's coming in and being turned on or off? So.
Right. Okay. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah. And if it makes you guys feel any better, like I said, I'm not very savvy when it comes to this stuff. So, I messed around with it for a day to get it all set up. I mean, from a completely different, piece. I messed around with it with a day, and then I've uploaded it and set it up like 2 or 3 times just to get familiarize myself with it, so I could make sure I deliver it in a way that made sense. So it's not rocket science, but there is some things, and I'll put those in my notes. I have those in here, that little things that you can get hung up on. The graphic one was the one that kind of hung me up a little bit, and then making this text block appear and disappear was something that I had to have one of my people help me with here. But once you kind of once you set that up, then I was like, oh yeah, that's easy. Once you do it once, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, yeah, that'd be really helpful. I mean, we don't have any coders here, so
cool. Okay.
All our coders are in Hong Kong, so yeah, it would be helpful just to get your notes, and that'll help us walk through it.
Okay, I'll gather all that stuff together. So, I mean, like I said, never having done this before, I didn't know how long it was going to take us. So we can call it here if you guys want to, or if you had other questions, or on anything. It doesn't have to just be on last week or whatever. If you guys have any questions or any anything that's been hanging you up, or questions that have been floating around that you've been wondering about, this is your time. So.
Yeah. Richard, this is Stephanie. I just have one follow-up question. Were you able to get clarification about the deactivated files, if they still take up our storage space or not?
I was not able to get a clear answer, but I was able to get a confirmation from the VP of our services that we wouldn't count it against you guys. So I was asking, like, do we count that? And nobody seemed to know, like, oh, I didn't know. But the VP of Services said we won't do that. So don't worry about it. And they told me they're meeting with one of our engineers today to find out about it, and it's been kind of ping-ponged around a little bit. So I was saying, well, I don't have a definitive answer, but we said, whatever, if the answer is yes, that we do count it against you, we're not going to count it against you. We'll give you whatever that much until we figure out how to better manage it to keep it within the guidelines.
Okay, I'm sure it won't be an issue, but I can follow up with Jessica too if I have additional questions down the
And I brought up with Jessica too, so that when we get confirmation on that she was going to follow up with you directly too, in case it was, after we do our webinars and all that stuff. So the other thing is too, we have the kind of final webinar, and plus there's other time that it's your guys' time too that you can keep with services. With that final webinar, again, you guys have the 2 hours that you can use as you wish. So I'll kind of leave it up to you guys when you want to schedule that. It's okay to reach out to me directly, and then we can schedule that at your leisure, when you're after you guys maybe get all Fusion Pro installed, or you've tried to build these. We can go over this stuff, and if there's any other kind of portal setup stuff that you wanted to go over, we can always kind of review that at the time as well. So.
Absolutely. We'll keep that in our back pocket and familiarize ourselves with all of the information you have given to us so far, and see what we need additional training on.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks for your time, you guys, and I will follow up this afternoon with the recording and the files for all this stuff as well. So.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks.
Have a good
Thanks,
one.
sir.
Bye, guys.
Bye.